Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible to you all?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Good
sir, you
audible.
are.
All right. I'd request the participants to switch on their videos and keep themselves in the mute mode. You have gone through the rules and you are aware about the time slot distribution that we have to distribute the time amongst the speaker one and two. Is it? All right, let me begin. Good afternoon. My name is Kabir Hazarika. So I am your court master for this session, and I'd like to welcome our honorable judges and the participants alike. Let me introduce you to judge number one, Mr. Ajay Kumar Pandey, who has been in practice for more than 25 years. It's almost 26 years. And he primarily deals in almost all kinds of matters that includes civil, criminal matters, plus arbitration and also matrimonial matters. And he has been in the panel of government of Delhi and practices in Delhi High Court. And he had panels, and I believe he has panels of Punjab National Bank, Corporation Bank, and also practices in the DRT, including various district courts. And in one particular matter, he has in which he appeared in 1999 in Urmila Sharma versus SD Public School and others, reported in 1996 by the Apex Court. Decision appearing for the petitioner before Justice K. Ramamurthy, Delhi High Court. It was held that the writ petition was maintainable against a private recognized school. And our next judge is Dr. Prayag Dutt Pandeyji, and he has been in practice since 2008. He did his BA, LLB, and LLM, and specializes in constitutional governance, human rights and international humanitarian laws, criminal laws, along with other practices like the family law and jurisprudence. He has also written 5 papers, and I welcome you all, sir. And there's one more point, Mr.
Thank you, sir.
Pandey
Thank
is
you.
also an assistant public prosecutor practicing in the Saket District Court in Delhi. I welcome you, sir, and I also welcome our participants. And I wish all the best to all the participants. And kindly stick to your time slot and also, maintain the decorum and refrain from sharing any documents or identity disclosures which may lead to deduction of points. All right, I hand over to the prosecution side. Kindly allow me the time slots that you want to speak, speaker one and two.
So speaker 1 and 2 each will have 13 and a half minutes and 3 minutes for rebuttal.
All right.
Yes.
Kindly keep your chat box on so that I can send the time warnings. Yes. And from the defense side, anyone?
Yes, sir. The defense side will be taking 14 minutes each, and we'll be saving 2 minutes for the rejoinders.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All the best. Uh, Honorable judges, anything that you want to put across before you start?
Time of start is, I think, 3
We'll start at 3:05, sir.
3 5.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So we have
And
not taken some.
yes, sir. Thank you so much. So in about a couple of minutes, I'll hand over to the prosecution side. And sir, this question is to the judges. So would you be taking up the questions at the end of their speeches?
Yes.
All
After
right.
end of the speech of the prosecution side, we'll put a question on them, and
Yes.
thereafter, after end of the defense side argument, we'll put the question on them.
All right, sir. Thank you so
I
much.
think it will be better, otherwise they will be in trouble.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, I leave it to the prosecution side. You have about a minute or so. You can prepare and start.
Should I wait for a minute or should I start?
Yes, when it is 3-5, you can start.
All right.
After 1 minute, you may start. After 1 minute.
You can
You
start.
may start.
I can start.
Yes, sir. I'll start now. The council seeks permission to address the bench as your lordships.
Just you may address as a sir.
All right. Good afternoon, sir. May it please this honorable court, counsel is appearing on behalf of the prosecution in the instant case of state NIA versus Sameer and others for the purpose of trial before this honorable court. I am speaker number 1 from Team Code 537. Would sir appreciate a brief perusal of facts?
Yes, you may start.
Yes, you can proceed.
Yes, sir. So the facts are the special cell police detained 2 suspects carrying large amounts of fake currency notes from Old Delhi railway station on 25th February 2015. Sameer, that is accused number 1, and Monu, accused number 2, were each carrying 250 notes of high quality for rupees 2000 denomination having face value of rupees 5 lakh each. They were charged under certain sections before the National Investigation Agency, hereinafter referred to as the NIA, re-registered the case under section 120B, 489B and 489C of the Indian Penal Code 1860, hereinafter referred to as the IPC, in compliance with order number 26/2015 dated 30th April 2015. Section 16, 17, 18, and 20 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967, hereinafter referred to as UAPA, were also invoked. Sameer A1 and Amonu A2 admitted their involvement in the case and disclosed the names of Kallu at Mama, that is accused number 3, Peter, accused number 4, and Sohail, accused number 5, who were planning to carry out the bomb blast in Pulwama on an Indian Army convoy on 15th August. Accused number 3 was arrested after following due procedure and establishing a case against him with the help of evidence produced. If sirs are satisfied and well versed with the facts, counsel would like to proceed with jurisdiction.
Yes, proceed.
The counsel for the state hereby humbly submits to this honorable court's jurisdiction under section 13 and section 14 of the National Investigation Agency Act 2008. Section 13 gives jurisdiction to the special courts to try any scheduled offense, and section 14 gives powers to the special courts to try any other offense connected to such offense. Your lordships, in the present matter, there are 3 main issues at hand. For the next 13.5 minutes, counsel will be dealing with the first issue and the second issue, whereas my co-counsel will be dealing with the third issue. Counsel would like to move forward with the first issue at hand, that of whether the accused are guilty of using and possessing fake Indian currency notes. Counsel seeks to rely on the knowledge of the bench about each section and would like to proceed with the arguments directly. Your Lordship, it is humbly submitted that in order to constitute an offence of using high quality FICNs under section 489B of IPC, the following ingredients need to be satisfied as is given in Kiran Kumar K. Khanda versus State of Maharashtra and Pannalal Gupta versus State of Sikkim. The 5 ingredients are: 1. The note in question is a currency note or a bank note. 2. It was forged or counterfeited. 3. The accused sold to or brought from or received it from any other person. 4. That the accused knew or had reason to believe that it was forged or counterfeit. And 5. The accused intended to use the same as genuine. Your Lordship, the first and the second ingredient is proved by the CFSL report, which is in accordance with Rule 6 of the Investigation of High Quality Counterfeit Indian Currency Offences Rule, 2013, which states that the preliminary report consists of satisfied ingredients of the third schedule of UAPA, which results in the confirmation of the notes being in question being high quality FICNs. The third ingredient, so that of the notes being sold to or brought from or received it from any other person, along with the fourth ingredient that the accused had knowledge or reason to believe that about the notes being forged or counterfeit, is also satisfied against the three accused. In the case of Mehboob Ali versus State of Rajasthan, it was held that information regarding the involvement of the accused was admissible, where on the basis of information regarding the source of counterfeit currency notes, accused who supplied it and subsequently all the others involved in the racket were arrested. Though there were no recovery of the notes from the intermediaries and the information was held admissible as the police were not aware of the other accused who were involved in the offence. Your Lordships, in the present case, Samir, accused 1, and Monu, accused number 2, confessed that they had received the FICNs from Kallu at Mama, accused number 3, from Malda, West Bengal. These confessions of the co-accused are admissible in court under Section 27 of the Evidence Act if they lead to the discovery of a new fact, as has been given in Mehboob Ali. The NIA team identified A3 after going to Malda. The accused's journey to Malda has also been confirmed with the help of the train tickets. The accused association of Kallu at Mama, that is accused number 3, has been established with the help of the call detail records, along with A3 admitting the same in the subsequent search and seizure of A1 and A2. Furthermore, sir, all the three accused had knowledge that the FICNs were going to be used for the bomb blast on the Indian Army convoy in Pulwama, as has been stated by them, as was their plan. The same is admissible in court under Section 27 of the Indian Evidence Act 1872, hereinafter referred to as the Evidence Act, as it leads to the discovery of their plan, which is confirmed and proven with the help of the tower locations of their mobiles from their call records, transcripts on important dates, which proves their plans relating to the blast. This also proves that all the three accused had the requisite mens rea about the plan and what the counterfeit currency was supposed to be used for. So the fifth ingredient is of the accused intending to use the counterfeit notes as genuine. This has again been proven along with the fourth ingredient. The high quality FICNs were to be utilized for the bomb blast in Pulwama as stated by the three accused and confirmed by the tower locations along with the call detail records and the transcripts. So the 5 ingredients required to constitute an offence under Section 489B of IPC have been satisfied, and it is humbly submitted that the charge against the accused under the said section is proven and shall be levied. Proceeding to the charge of possession of high quality FICN under Section 489C of IPC. So upon plain reading of the above section, and as has been given in the case of Pannalal Gupta versus State of Sikkim, the ingredients required to constitute an offence under the said section are similar to that of the section of 489B with an additional ingredient of the counterfeit notes being in possession of the accused. The additional ingredient, that of accused number 1 and accused number 2 having possession of the counterfeit notes, is established during the search, seizure and arrest of the accused, which can be proven with the help of the respective memos which were prepared in front of and signed by independent witnesses. The seizure memos have clearly stated that the high quality FICNs were procured from black canvas bag and a maroon canvas bag found in the possession of accused number 1 and accused number 2 while traveling from Malda to Delhi. So the CDR records, along with the train tickets and phone data of the phones seized, found, further go on to prove that the statements of the accused and their movement from Madhya Pradesh to West Bengal and frequent telephonic conversation. It has been proved that accused number 3 was in fact the person circulating the notes taken from Sohail and given to accused number 1 and accused number 2. Thus, it can be proven that accused number 3 was in possession of the high quality FICNs in the past before giving it to accused number 1 and 2. The counsel humbly submits that the 3 accused were using and in possession of the counterfeit currency of which they possessed the knowledge and the requisite mens rea along with the intention to use the same as genuine, and hence Samir, accused number 1, Monu, accused number 2, and Kallu at Mama, accused number 3, are liable to be convicted under Section 489B and Section 489C of IPC. Proceeding with the second issue, sir, that of whether the accused are guilty of terrorist activity, raising funds for terrorist activity, and being a part of terrorist gang or organization involved in terrorist activity. So the council humbly submits that according to section 43E of UAPA, if any substances mentioned under section 15 of UAPA have been found in the possession of the accused, and if there is reason to believe that these substances were used for the purpose of commission of such offense, then the offense under section 15 read with section 16 of UAPA is presumed by the court unless the contrary is shown. So the council humbly submits that possession of FICNs with the accused along with their intent to use it for the commission of such offense has been duly established on the basis of the arguments made earlier. Thus, the burden of proving the innocence of the said acts therefore shifts to the accused. However, the council submits that for the sake of arguments, council will briefly prove each section charged under UAPA. So proceeding with the proceeding with section 16 of UAPA, which punishes terrorist act given under section 15 of UAPA, the council submits that a joint reading of the two sections indicates that the circulation of high quality counterfeit notes constitutes a terrorist act which shall be punishable under section 16. So the council humbly argues that the accused Samir A1 and Monu A2 were in possession of the high quality FICNs as is shown in the search and seizure memo of and their train tickets indicate that they had been circulating the same from Malda to Delhi. The same has also been proved by the council earlier. Your Lordship, the CDR records along with the train tickets and phone data of the phone seized found further go on to prove that the statements of the accused and their movement from Madhya Pradesh to West Bengal and frequent telephonic conversation. It has been proved that Kallu at Mama, that is accused number 3, was in fact the person circulating the notes taken from Sohail and given to A1 and A2 in the presence of Sohail at the house of Kallu at Mama. The same has been proven in accordance with the confessions given by Kallu at Mama A3, which becomes admissible and reliable under Section 10 along with Section 27 of the Evidence Act, as it has been proven with the help of the witness named Shaurak Khan. So, council would like to submit that Section 17 of UAPA can be proven with the help of the same evidence. The accused have been charged under the said section for raising and abetting to raise funds for terrorist activity. So, raising funds under this section shall include raising or collecting or providing funds through production, circulation, or smuggling of high quality counterfeit Indian currency. The council humbly submits that with the help of the evidence submitted above, it can be proven that accused number 1, accused number 2, and accused number 3 were in fact circulating high quality FICNs, and the fact that it was high quality FICN has also been proven with the help of the CFSL report. Therefore, sir, the offense of raising funds for terrorist act by way of circulation of high quality FICNs is proven, and the accused must be charged under the same. So the accused are also charged for being a part of terrorist gang or organization according to Section 20 of UAPA. The council submits that terrorist gang has been defined under Section 2L of UAPA as any association other than the terrorist organization, whether systematic or otherwise, which is concerned with or involved in any terrorist activity. So the council humbly submits that with the help of evidence produced and arguments advanced, charges under Section 16 and Section 17 of UAPA have been established. It follows, according to the meaning of the Terrorist Act given in Section 15(3)(a) of UAPA, that the accused A1, A2, and A3 were in fact involved in a terrorist activity and therefore constitute a terrorist gang, as is given in the definition of under Section 2L of UAPA. The council respectfully submits also that the accused satisfies all the charges, namely 16, 17, and 20 of UAPA, and subsequently should be held liable under the same. That concludes my submission, sir. If you're satisfied, council would like to call upon the co-counsel to take this further.
Good afternoon, sirs. This is co-counsel, speaker number 2. May I proceed with my submissions?
Yes, short.
Sure. My lords, I'll be dealing with the last and the third issue, which is whether the accused are guilty of criminal conspiracy, waging and abetting war, concealing the intent to wage war, and giving false information to screen an offender. My lord, this issue contains 4 sub-issues, The first one is whether the offence under section 120B, 121 and 123 of IPC can be presumed under section 111A of the Evidence Act. My lord, I submit that for some grievous offences, there is a provision in the Evidence Act which permits this honorable court to presume that the accused have committed the offence. The provision to presume criminal conspiracy is stated in section 111A. Now, my lord is aware of this statutory provision in all of the earlier cases that my lord has already decided. So I won't waste this precious time of this court by perusing the section. I will just move on towards my submissions. My lords are aware that the presumption is not on evidence, evidence or proof. It only shows on whom the burden of proof lies. So, in the present case, the burden of proof is shifted on the accused. That is, the defense now has to prove whether the accused has committed the offence or not. But still, for the sake of arguments and for my lord's better understanding of the case at hand, I'll prove that the accused have committed the offence in the further sub-issues. My lord, now proceeding towards the next sub-issue, which is whether the accused can be penalized under conspiracy, penalized for conspiracy under section 120B of IPC and section 18 of UAP. My lords, I submit that the charge of conspiracy on the accused is justified, and the same will be proven in this sub-issue. Since the ingredients of section 120B of IPC and section 18 of UAP are similar, they will be dealt together. The meaning and the ingredients of criminal conspiracy is given in section 120A, my lord. And the main ingredients of section 120A are: first, there should be two or more persons. Second, there should be an agreement between themselves. And third is the most important ingredient, my lord. The third one is the agreement to do or cause to be done an illegal act or a legal act by illegal means. Now, my lord, since direct evidence proving conspiracy is not found in our case, the arguments are based on indirect evidences, that is, inferences drawn from circumstances. It is submitted that a similar view was held by the learned bench of Justice Islam and Justice Baharul of the Apex Court, my lord, in the case of Mohammad Maniar versus State of Maharashtra. And I quote, my lord, while drawing an inference from the materials brought on record to arrive at a finding as to whether the charges of criminal conspiracy have been proved or not, one must always bear in mind that a conspiracy is hatched in secrecy, and it is difficult, if not impossible, to obtain direct evidence to establish the same. My lord, furthermore, meeting of minds of two or more persons for doing or causing to be done an illegal act is mandatory to successfully charge the accused of conspiracy. I'll be relying on the CDR analysis to prove this ingredient. The CDR analysis shows that all the accused were in constant touch and they were smuggling the counterfeited notes on more than one occasion. My lords, the analysis of the CDR, the phone data of the phone seized from accused number 1 and accused number 2, clearly establishes their movement from Madhya Pradesh to West Bengal, and the frequent telephonic conversation between accused number 1 and 3 and accused number 4 and 3 on 23rd Feb 2015, that is, before the arrest of accused number 1 and 2, proved that they were a part of criminal conspiracy. My lord, the Honorable Supreme Court has laid down another aspect of criminal conspiracy in the landmark judgment of Ram Narayan Popli versus CBI. And I quote, my lords, the ingredients mentioned in the case are: first, an object to be accomplished; second, a plan or scheme embodying means to accomplish that object; and third, which is an agreement or understanding between two or more of the accused persons. Now, my lords, in the case at hand, the object to be accomplished was the bomb blast on the Indian Army convoy, which satisfies the first ingredient. The second ingredient is designing of a plan to accomplish the objective, and in the present case, it was smuggling of the counterfeiting notes, which aided to accomplish the bomb blast. And the third and the most important ingredient, that is meeting of minds, my lords. To prove the same, I submit that the accused have confessed that they smuggled counterfeiting notes on earlier occasions, which is proved with the help of CDR analysis in point number 17.29 and 17.30 of the charge sheet. And those statements are admissible under section 27 of Evidence Act, my lord, since the statements are leading to a discovery of a fact. The chain of events coupled with the material evidences on the record drive to a conclusion that the conspiracy was hatched back in 2013, my lords, when they met for the first time during the conference. All the accused got close to each other extremely fast under the pretext of having agony against the government, although the accused has also stated that they had different ideologies. This, my lords, prove that they weren't meeting for protesting against the government policies, and they had a different agenda for meeting regularly. And in our case, that is, my lord, the bomb blast on the Indian Army convoy with the help of funds in the form of counterfeiting notes. My lord, the anguish against the government brought the accused together to conspire and commit a crime against the government. And so accordingly, the consignments of the FICNs, that is fake Indian currency notes, started first in July 2014 and again second time in September 2014. My lord, these has been proved with the help of the CDR records of the accused, which shows that they traveled from Malda to Pulwama to smuggle the counterfeiting notes, and the statements given by the accused, which are again admissible because they lead to a discovery of a fact. My lord, to summarize, the knowledge of the fake currency notes, the constantly meeting for its procurement and transfer, along with the knowledge of the task for which it was being utilized, and the call records, my lord, these all are sufficient enough to successfully charge the accused with both the provisions of conspiracy. My lords, now moving towards the next sub issue, that is the third sub issue, that is whether the accused can be convicted for waging or abetting to wage war and concealing the intent to wage war. My lords, I submit that all the ingredients of section 121 are fulfilled, and it will be proved accordingly in this following sub issue. The section is also covered under the ambit of section 111A of the Evidence Act as explained earlier. It must be presumed by this honorable court again that the accused have committed the offence, and the burden is now shifted on the accused to prove whether they are guilty or not. My lord, the two important aspects of this section are: first, waging war or attempts or abates to wage war against the government of India. My lord, I submit that my case is similar to the illustration given by the legislators of the IPC. The meaning of the term war in the illustration of the section states an insurrection against the government. That is, my lord, a violent protest, an unrest, or any such other act which may disturb peace and order of the society. This similar contention is also opined by Justice Reddy and Justice Naulikar in State versus Navjot Sindhu by the in Honorable Supreme Court. But this is the infamous case of 2001 Parliament attack. And now I'll be relying on the Indian Law Commission's report stated on the draft of the IPC in 1847, my lord. My lord, this report was of prime importance while deciding the famous case of 2611 of Ajmal Kasab versus State of Maharashtra. My lord, and I quote, in waging war, the intent of the foreign enemy is not only to disturb public peace or law and order, but also to kill many people. A foreign enemy strikes at the sovereignty of the state, and his conspiracy and actions are motivated by that animus. Accordingly, my lords, the intent of the accused was prima facie to disturb the peace, law and order, and kill as many as people possible in the process of blasting the bomb in Pulwama on Indian Army convoy. My lords, it is submitted that the accused were planning to wage war against the government of India. The investigating agency drew sketches with the help of accused number 3 of the places where accused number 3 and accused number 4 were discussing about the probable locations of the bomb blast in Pulwama. This statement is admissible again since it is an exception under section 27 of Evidence Act, my lords. It is submitted that since accused number 1 and accused number 2 were smuggling the counterfeit notes in relation to the bomb blast for which they had prior knowledge, which resulted in abetting or waging of war, and therefore they must be convicted under the said section. Therefore, it is submitted that all the ingredients of the section are proved and the charge is justified. My lords, proceeding towards the next section in this sub-issue itself, that is section 123. My lords, it is contended that this section also comes under the purview of section 111A of Evidence Act. Therefore, again, it must be presumed by this honorable court that the accused have committed the offence under section 123. Although, again, for the sake of argument, I'll prove the ingredients of the above mentioned section. Now, my lords, this particular section is regarding the mens rea of section 121. Therefore, any person who knowingly plans an act which might or will wage war can be convicted under this section. My lords, in our case, it is already proved that the accused had abetted to wage a war against the government of India. Accordingly, to conceal their plan of bomb blast, the accused used a secret code, namely, and I quote, my lords, "Dulhan ko sajane ka waqt aa gaya hai." This proves that the accused not only had knowledge of such an act which will start a war against the government of India, but also were concealing the whole plan with the help of secret codes. Therefore, my lords, it is proved by the prosecution that the charge under section 123 of IPC, that is concealing the intent to wage war, is justified. My lords, proceeding towards the last sub issue, that is whether the accused can be held guilty for giving false information to screen an offender. My lords, it is submitted that the accused were tampering with the evidence and screening the offenders, due to which this section has been attracted. Accused number 1 and accused number 2 in their statements recorded under 161 of CRPC have stated that they didn't know what was in the bags they were carrying. My lord, this is a false statement, which it's a false information, and the reality was that they knew what they were in possession of, and they regularly smuggled counterfeiting notes as proved earlier by the prosecution. Also, in point number 17.28 of the charge sheet, my lord, the investigating agency came to the conclusion that accused number 3 had destroyed all the evidences before the search by the investigating agency. Again, my lord, during the investigation, accused number 3 gave evasive answers about the whereabouts of accused number 5, which made it impossible for the agency to locate and find accused number 5. My lord, accused number 5 is one of the main co-conspirators who is still absconding. Furthermore, my lord, since they both were last seen together on the morning of 20th June in 2015 in Malda, therefore, accused number 3 was aware of Sohail's location, that is, accused number 5's location. Therefore, it is submitted that the charges on the accused are proved successfully. My lords, to conclude our arguments, I submit that prima facie, the investigation conducted by the investigating agency has been carried out following the due procedure of law. Moreover, there isn't any lacuna in the procedure. My lords will appreciate that now the time has come to pass a very strong message by dealing with the accused in this present case who have committed such heinous offences. A message should be passed that whosoever will indulge into such activities will not be spared, and therefore it is humbly prayed that a maximum possible punishment under deterrent theory of punishment must be awarded in this present case. Obliged, my lords.
So then next team.
I request the honorable judges to put up their questions.
Yes. Okay. Speaker number 1.
Yes, sir.
So please tell me about the whereabouts of the accused number 5. If he is not arrested, then what the further procedure will be take place by the court, by the investigation agency and the court?
Sir, as of now, he is.
Absconding.
Sorry.
Accused number 5 is still absconding. So what further procedure will be taken place by the court and the investigation agency? By the court.
So, as of now, the accused number 5 is absconding, and it has been proven that the accused number 5 had crossed the border and went into Bangladesh. So, the court's jurisdiction may not apply on accused number 5.
Okay, right. It is appearing in the charge sheet itself.
Yes,
It has come to the notice in the charge sheet itself. Second thing is, my next judge, Mr. Gyan Ganga ji.
Sir, Prayag Dutt Pandey.
Prayag Dutt Pandey ji. Sorry. Can you put question?
There are two more questions from participant number 1. There are two sections in IPC, section 3 and 4. You must go through those sections. There are extraterritorial jurisdiction. If offense committed outside jurisdiction of the court, still court have jurisdiction, and if accused are apprehended, they may be charged. And in the present case, when whereabouts of the accused number 5 is not known, there is a provision of section 174A. Okay. You may proceed to declare them proclaimed offender, and NBW investigation agency can obtain NBW against the accused person who is absconding from the jurisdiction of the court. Second thing, there is some accused person shown in column number 12 of the charge sheet. You have not give focus upon them, whether any evidence you are investigation agencies collected from them or not.
So, can you repeat your question? I couldn't understand.
What is evidence against accused number 12?
4.
Yes.
Accused number 4.
Yes,
Sir,
sir.
accused number 4. There are some persons are shown in column number 12 of the charge sheet. In charge sheet, there are main accused which are mentioned in column number 11, and there are some accused which are mentioned in column number 12. What is evidence, and whether how we can proceed them, which name are mentioned in column number 12 of the charge sheet?
So, if you could give me 1 minute to go through column number 12, I may revert back to you.
Okay.
You go through in the meantime, speaker number 2. We have question.
Yes, sir.
Speaker number 2.
Yes, sir.
You have stated, you have argued that the section 111A, Indian Evidence Act, there is a presumption, but let me know that these persons, 2 persons, accused number 1 and 2, have to go Pulwama for the purpose of using that counterfeit money in the bomb blast. They are at the Pulwama. But in support of these contention, what are the other evidences, connecting evidences? Because these are the disclosure evidence recorded during the custody, which is not admissible in the evidence. Then is there any other independent evidence collected by the investigation agency which support these contentions raised by you?
My lords, since the bomb blast hasn't yet been committed, so there are no particular evidence regarding the bomb blast. But
Right.
as to the part of them traveling to Pulwama, the CDR records is a report which tells about the locations of their phones. With the help of the same, it has been proved that they were constantly traveling from Malda to Pulwama.
They have any tickets or anything else has been collected by the investigation agencies in support of this argument?
My lords, no. For the initial consignments, there aren't any other possible evidence other than the CDR records, since it was in the past. But for the last consignment, in which the accused number 1 and 2 were arrested, for that the train tickets can be found till Delhi, and after that they were going to travel by road.
Okay, all right.
And my lord, just one thing I wanted to add to my submission is that all these statements are come under the purview of Section 27 of Evidence Act, my lord. Since these statements lead to a discovery of a fact, therefore these are admissible in this court.
Anything else has been discovered on the
No,
basis
my
of
lords.
disclosure? Anything more?
No, my lords.
Something else? No.
No, my lords.
Okay. Now you may ask your question.
Sir, question from participant number 2. Whether you have any direct or indirect evidence to show the agreement between the accused persons, except CDR and call detail of the accused persons.
No, my lords. Other than the CDR and the tickets, only the statements which come under the purview of Section 27 of Evidence Act, these three are only the possible evidences that can be used to draw inferences, and that is the indirect evidence.
CDR and call detail and mobile location is not a very good and very scientific evidence. There is every possibility to temper the CDR and call detail. How you can remove the possibility that you produce the CDR is not tempered or not hampered?
My lords, under Section 66A of Evidence Act, a prior certificate has already been taken by the prosecution, which proves that the CDR records hasn't been tampered.
Is it 65?
Any
66A or
65A. Apologies, my lord. 65A. And it has been already submitted during the trial. And since we are at final arguments over here.
65B certificate is given by the service provider?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That has been dealt by this very court during the trial itself.
Okay, sir. I think we start from the defense counsel.
So to
more clarification by speaker number 1.
Yes, sir. So to answer your question, sir, accused number 4, as is mentioned in point number 11 and 12, has already succumbed and is dead, and therefore no proceedings can be initiated against him.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir,
Okay,
for the
then.
question answers session. And let's proceed to the next segment of our session today. Let the defense counsels they present their speeches, please. Thank you.
So shall I start at 40 or just start right now?
Start at 40.
40.
Sure, sir. The council seeks the permission of the bench to address them collectively as the lordships.
You can
Collectively,
proceed.
or I think you have divided the time for 12 minutes each, 14 minutes each.
Your lordship, it's 14 minutes each and 2
14
minutes for
minutes.
the rejoinder.
Yes, 14 minutes each and 7 minutes for
2 minutes for the
2
rejoinder.
minutes for rejoinder.
Yes, your lordship.
You should start one by one, I think.
Yes, your lordships. First, I will be giving my submissions and then my co-counsel.
Okay.
Yes, your lordship.
Now your time has started now.
Yes, your lordship. The council is here on the behalf of the defendants in the case of state NIA versus Samir and others, where Samir, Monu, and Kallu are accused of an offense under section 120B, 121, 123, 489B, 489C, and 201 of the Indian Penal Code 1860 and sections 16, 17, 18, and 20 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967. The council would the council would like to state that the accused have not committed any of the offences stated in the FIR, which will be proved by us in our submissions. To approach with jurisdiction, the case is filed before this honorable court under section 13 and 14 of the National Investigation Agency Act 2008 in order to take cognizance in this matter. The trial court is entitled to decide the matter under section 11 and 12 of the NIA Act as decided in the case of Bikramjit Singh versus State of Punjab. Your lordships may refer to page 5 of the memorial. The council will be dealing with the first three issues, that is the FIR correctly recorded or not? Does the act of the accused person amounts to the offense under section 489B and 489C of the IPC 1860? And does the act of the accused person qualifies as a terrorist act under section 16 and 17 of the UAPA 1967? To start with, if your lordships are well versed with the facts, the council would like to seek permission to start with the issues.
Okay, you start.
Your lordships, to start with the issue 1, I would like to state that the FIR registered by the police under section 154 of CRPC is not correctly recorded. The first contention of its being not improperly recorded is the fact that the FIR is antedated. The facts that were presented by the police mentioned that first the articles were seized, then seizure memos were prepared, and after that the FIR was prepared. But the memos which were presented before this honorable court in the evidence also contain the FIR number on them. This shows that the FIR is antedated. In the case of Pawan Kumar versus the Delhi administration, your lordships may refer to point 1.2.1 on page number 11 of the memorial. The court observed that the seizure memos contained FIR number and FIR was declared antedated. Again, in the case of Muhammad Hashim versus State, your lordships may refer to point 1.2.2 on page number 12 of the memorial. Here, the court analyzed that the presence of FIR number on the seizure memos could only mean that the FIR was inserted, that the FIR was recorded prior to the alleged recovery of the contrabands, or number of said FIRs were added in order to prove the offense. In both the situations, it seriously reflects upon the veracity of the prosecution and creates a good deal of doubt about the recovery of contraband. In the present case, the time of the registration of FIR, the general diary reference, and when that is when the informant gave the information, and the entry number are not mentioned. Many of the sections regarding the alleged offences are mentioned in the FIR, but however, those offences came into light on a much later date. For example, the offence under section 15 and 16 of the UAPA was added on 16th April 2015, but the offences are already mentioned in the FIR. This clearly shows that either the police acted in total careless manner or that the police acted voluntarily in a way to taint the investigation and frame the accused in the offense that was not committed by them. The time of the FIR had very important part in the whole case, and the gender diary reference would have been given a static proof that the information was received by the police station. Since this information is not available in front of the court, the investigation done by police also comes into question. The council would further like to drag the attention of the courts towards the substance that in Exhibit 4 and 5, your lordships may refer to page 45 and 46 of the proposition. The sanctions provided by the Ministry of Home Affairs and the district magistrate were only for launching prosecution against Samir and Monu. No sanction was provided for prosecution against Kallu. So, according to Section 18 of the National Investigation Agency Act, where it is mentioned that no prosecution, suit, or legal proceedings shall be instituted in any court of law except with the previous sanction of the central government, the prosecution against Kallu had no valid point. Also, the evidences given by the police is not enough to prove the offense. It was mentioned that the FICN was recovered from shoulder bags from both Samir and Monu, but those bags are not shown in the evidence. So it is doubtful that whether the number of notes are exact quantity recovered, or even if the recovery was in fact effected at all. Another recovery item is that the train ticket is doubtful in nature. It is mentioned that the train tickets recovered from Samir and Monu, your lordships may refer to Annexure C and D on the page 30 and 31 of the proposition, were dated 23rd February. And according to that, the train would have reached the Old Delhi railway station on 24th February, as the time to travel from Malda to Old Delhi takes just 25 hours, that is 1 day and 1 hour. Another point of consideration is that the NIA mentioned in the charge sheet filed by them that they got information from an independent witness that he saw Kallu with an unknown person, and another witness, Shah Rukh Khan, who claimed that he saw Sohail with Kallu and an unknown person. The statement of this witness was not recorded by the NIA team, so it is a total possibility that the police has not done justice with the criminal justice system and have tainted the FIR to committing the accused for the offense they have not committed. Prosecution is basing all of their arguments in this matter on the exception provided for the admissibility of statements mentioned under Section 27 of the Indian Evidence Act. But their interpretation of the section is not correct as per the principle established by law. In order to make the statements admissible under this section, there needs to be a discovery of fact or evidence subsequent to making the statement. And according to prosecution, recovery of FICN is the subsequent discovery. The actual fact was that the arrest was based on the recovery of FICN, which was way before the statements given out by the accused. So therefore, the exception of Section 27 also doesn't apply here. Now, coming on to the second issue, that is whether the act of the accused amounts to offense under Section 489B and 489C of the Indian Penal Code, the council would like to say that the accused are wrongly accused of the offense under Section 489B and 489C of the Indian Penal Code 1860. The honorable judges in the case of Sabir Sheikh versus State of Madhya Pradesh, your lordships may refer to point 2.4 on page number 14 of the memorial, laid down the essentials to establish the offense under the above mentioned section as, first of all, the note in the question is a currency note or bank note. Second, it was forged or counterfeit. Third, the accused sold to or bought from or received it from any person. And fourth, that the accused knew or had the reason to believe it to be forged or counterfeit. Similar are the ingredients for establishing offense under Section 489C also. All these essentials need to be fulfilled in order to establish the offense under this section. But in the present case, all the essentials are not established. Although the report of a CFSL shows that the notes are FICN, the most important essential, that is mens rea, mentioned as knowing or having the reason to believe the currency notes or bank notes are forged or counterfeit, is not established in the present case. In the case of Uma Shankar versus State of Chhattisgarh, the lordships may refer to point 2.5, page number 15 of the memorial. The court adjudged that without mens rea, selling, buying, or receiving from any other person or otherwise trafficking in or using as genuine, forged, or counterfeit currency notes or bank notes, it's not enough to constitute the offense under Section 489B. Again, in the case of Rahul Dinkar Vajkal versus State of Maharashtra, it was held that charge sheet did not contain any material to show that he was proposing to traffic or use the said notes as genuine, or that he had the knowledge or reason to believe that the said notes are forged or counterfeit. So mens rea could not be proved. Therefore, it is established that mens rea is an important aspect for providing punishment for a crime under this section. It needs to be proved beyond reasonable doubt that the accused knowingly or having the reason to believe that the currency was fake have trafficked such currency from one place to another. In the present case, the accused had no knowledge that the notes were FICN. They were merely transporting the notes from West Bengal to Delhi, which is no offense. There is no evidence on record that the accused can in any way know that the notes were fake, since the notes were of high quality and since the notes were of high quality as per the preliminary report of the CFSL, common persons like Samir, Monu, and Kallu could not have known that the notes were fake. Again, in the case of Jivan Sasmal versus State of West Bengal, your lordships may refer to point 2.5 on the page number 16 of the memorial. It was held that mere possession of without evidence to prove appellants had the intention to use the same as genuine is not sufficient to uphold the charges under section 489B and 489C of the Indian Penal Code. There is no evidence on record produced by the charge sheet or by the prosecution that could support their arguments. The only thing on which the arguments of the prosecution is based is the recovery only, which does not in any way prove the offense of the accused. The implications made by the prosecutions are thereby false implications, and since all the censures are not proved beyond reasonable doubt, the accused are not liable of the offenses under the sections mentioned above. Now coming to the third issue, that is whether the accused act of the accused amounts to terrorist act and whether the accused are liable under section 16 and 17 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. The council wants to mention that the act of the accused does not amount to terrorist act according to section 15 of UAPA. From the bare reading of the section, we can infer the following essentials. First one is the intent. Second, does an act by using bombs, dynamite, or explosive substance or firearms or other lethal weapons or noxious gases. And third is to threaten or likely to threaten the unity, integrity, security, economic security, or sovereignty of India. None of these essentials are fulfilled by the evidence and charge sheet. The accused had no intention whatsoever to harm the unity and integrity of India. The important thing to consider here is that the question of intention comes into question only when they were carrying FICN. But they didn't knew that they were carrying FICN, and moreover, they had no intention to use that money for any terrorist act. Another point that is to be considered here is that the railway tickets that were recovered from accused were from West Bengal to Delhi and not Pulwama, where the accused are said to have conducted the attack. So the intention of the accused to commit a terrorist act is negated. There is no proof that the money was taken by the accused for the purpose of terrorist act, and the accused is deemed to be innocent until proven guilty, and the accused cannot be proven guilty merely on the basis of their carrying FICN. The prosecution in the present case has used section 43E of the UAPA so as to create the presumption of offense under section 15. But here also the interpretation is not correct. According to section 43E subsection A, it is mentioned that there is a reason to believe that such arms or explosives or other substances of a similar nature were used in the commission of such offenses. Here the words commission of such offense means that an offense of terrorist act is committed, but there is no such act in the first place. So the interpretation of this section is wrong, and the onus to prove the offense still lies on the prosecution, which they cannot prove beyond reasonable doubt. So the offenses under section 489B, 489C of the Indian Penal Code and section 16 of UAPA cannot be proved. Also, the statements made by the accused in the police custody are not admissible in the court with respect to section 162 of the Criminal Procedure Code and section 25 and 26 of the Indian Evidence Act. Since all the statements were given by accused under police custody, as according to the wordings of charge sheet, your lordships may refer to point 17 on page 14 of the proposition, and section 25 and 26 specifically mention that any confession made by the accused under police custody cannot be proved against him. Here, the exception mentioned in 27 also doesn't apply, as none of those statements led to discovery of any material fact or any material evidence. Only CDR analysis cannot prove anything, and suspicion is not sufficient in order to make the accused liable. The last point of my contention is that the accused were also accused of an offense under section 17 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. This section mentions the offense of raising funds for terrorist act and punishment for that. From the bare reading of the sections, we can make out that the most important consideration for establishing the offense under this section is the mens rea, which is established by the line knowing that such funds are likely to be used in full or in part by such person or persons or by a terrorist organization or by a terrorist gang or by an individual terrorist to commit a terrorist act. It is evidently clear from the above statement that without knowledge there is no way that the accused can be made guilty of the offense under this section. In the present case, all of the accused had no knowledge that how the money was going to be used. They were merely transporting the money from West Bengal to Delhi and had no intention to use that money for a terrorist act. There is no evidence that shows that the accused had the currency that was to be used for terrorist act. Since the offences could not be proved against beyond reasonable doubt against the accused are not guilty of the offences under section 489B, 489C of the Indian Penal Code and section 15, 16, and 17 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967. Now I would like to offer the podium to my co-counsel to continue with the further issues.
Yes.
So should I start now or at 3:55?
Yes. Not 3:55. Okay. Your time is, I think, 3:55 till 14 minutes.
Yes, sir.
It will be, I think, 3:69.
Yes.
The time will be.
I think, sir, she can start because I'm
Yeah.
taking
Yes.
note of the time, sir.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right, you will start.
The council will like to seek the permission of this honorable court to refer to it collectively as your lordships.
All right.
Much obliged, your lordship. The council will be referring to the fourth and fifth issue, as my co-counsel has already referred to the first, second, and the third issue. Fourth issue being that does the accused persons are liable under section 120B of the IPC and section 18 and 20 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967. And the fifth issue being that whether the accused persons are liable under section 201, 121, and 123 of the Indian Penal Code 1860. The council would like to seek the permission of this bench to start with the fourth issue.
Yes.
Much obliged, your lordship. So, coming to the first point, that whether the act of the accused persons amount to joining of a terrorist organization under section 20 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967. Now, the point to be noted is that it was recently observed in September 2021 in the case of Thwasa Fazal versus Union of India that to prove the intent to further the activities of a terrorist organization, it is mandatory to make out an offense under section 38 and section 39 of the UAPA. But the point to be noted is that the learned counsel of the prosecution haven't proved the acts of the accused under section 38 and 39 of the UAPA, hence not establishing their relationship of any type of activity that are mentioned in these offenses. Moving on further to the next point, to make an offense under these sections, one could observe that the first and the foremost requirement is the terrorist organization that is present to be there, to whom the accused must have some connection. In the present case, the council will humbly submit that the youth union, the organization the accused were a part of, is neither a terrorist organization, nor they have any sort of connection with any banned terrorist organization as per the requirement under section 2, subsection 1, clause M of the UAP Act. And the second thing, that neither they were a terrorist gang, as this already been proved by my co-counsel, that to be a terrorist gang, there is needed to be their involvement in any type of activity, any type of terrorist activity, and with the intention to do it. And hence is not proved, this charge is hereby drops. There's no cogent proof regarding the fact that they were involved in any type of terrorist activity, or they were planning any type of terrorist act, like in this case is mentioned, the bomb blast on the Indian Army convoy in Pulwama on 15th of August 2015. Hence, as it is not proved that that the organization, that is the youth union, was a terrorist organization or a terrorist gang, the drops this drops the offences under the section 20, 38, and 39 of the UAP Act. Moving to the further offences, the council would like to first point out that to mention here, the section 101 of the Indian Evidence Act, it provides that the onus of the proof lies on the prosecution. But in the present case, as also stated by the prosecution, they are saying that it will be on the defense counsel as an exception to section 101. But I will like to seek the attention of this honorable court to the fact that the conditions that are to be fulfilled in order to make an exception under the section 111 are mentioned in subsection 1 and clause A and B. That is, the accused must have committed the offense in any disturbed area under any enactment, or any area with extensive disturbance for more than 1 month. These are not applicable in the present case, as it is nowhere to be inferred that the area where the accused were alleged to have committed the offense, that is Malda, West Bengal, and Delhi, as well as Pulwama, are the areas of extensive disturbance of public peace. Hence, the prosecution is trying to mislead this honorable court, as they haven't even mentioned the subsection 1, which is the most important part to prove to further subsection 2 in their memorial. Hence, they are clearly trying to mislead this honorable court by transferring the honors from them to the defense, as they don't have any proof of the said sections. But for the sake of the arguments, the defense will prove that the further sections are not, the accused are not liable for the further sections. So moving on to the next point. Does the act of the accused persons amount to criminal conspiracy under Section 120B of the Indian Penal Code 1860 and Section 18 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967? The counsel would like to draw the attention of this honorable court to the fact that all the ingredients are not satisfied in the present case, as are not even mentioned by the learned counsel, that must be proved to establish the criminal conspiracy. These are mentioned in Section 120A of the Indian Penal Code, as well as elaborated by the Supreme Court of India in the case of Yogesh versus State of Maharashtra 2008. The court may refer to page number 22, para 3.1.3 of the memorial submitted. It is humbly contended that the honorable court that one of the basic ingredients is not fulfilled in the present case, and that is the agreement to do or cause to be done some illegal act or any legal act by any illegal means. It's already been established by the council that neither they have any plan nor they have any intention to execute a bomb blast at the Indian Army convoy at Pulwama on 15th of August 2015. Also, they were not aware of the fact that the bag contains the high-quality fake Indian currency notes, which constitutes that they have no mens rea. They were involved in some kind of routine work of the organization, as also been stated in the charge sheet, that the organization has started a campaign for which the accused were given the task of raising the funds and sensitizing the oppressed classes of the society about the same. In accordance to which they were holding meetings at various places in West Bengal and have gone to Delhi too with the same motive, as also testified by the CDRs in the mobile locations. There is no prima facie evidence that is provided by the prosecution which clearly shows that they were conspiring for any type of illegal act. Also, to make a charge under this section, one should read it along with Section 34 of the Indian Penal Code that talks about the common intention, that is the meeting of the minds of two or more persons for doing or causing to be done any illegal act or any legal act by any illegal means, which is a sine qua non of the criminal conspiracy. Also, Section 10 of the Indian Evidence Act provides the grounds that are to be established by the prosecution in order to prove the charge of conspiracy against the accused, which say that the circumstantial evidences must be there as the conspiracy has in secrecy. But the call detailed records and the mobile location doesn't form a cogent circumstantial evidence to prove the offense of conspiracy against the accused, and hence they are only being dragged into this case. And also stated by the prosecution, the confessions given during the investigation, as they are mentioned in the charge sheet, are not as admissible, and hence there is no proof of the fact that they were conspiring to do any of the act mentioned as in the said offenses. Hence, it humbly submits that the accused are not liable under Section 120B and Section 18 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967. Moving further to the next issue, that thus the accused persons are liable under Section 201, 121, and 123 of the IPC 1860. It has also been contended by the counsel that the onus of proof of these lies on the prosecution. But for the sake of the arguments of proving that my accused are not guilty under these sections, we will present you the following arguments. So, moving on to the first point. Thus, the act of the accused persons amounts to disappearance of evidence under Section 201 of the Indian Penal Code 1860. It is contended that all the accused, namely Samir, Monu, and Kalu alias Mama, along with Peter and Sohail, are accused of causing the disappearance of evidence under this section. The main ingredients of establishing the offense under this section was observed in the landmark case of B.L. Teresa versus State of Kerala. The court please refer to para 5.1.3 on page 30 of the memorial submitted, and these are not satisfied in the present case. The point to be noted is that the prosecution haven't even mentioned anywhere in their memorial, hence nor they have any satisfied the main ingredients that are necessary to constitute a charge under this section. The counsel will prove that these ingredients are not fulfilled under this case. Moving to the first point, the counsel has already established the fact that neither the accused has committed nor has attempted to commit any offense, any of the said offense that is given under section 489B, 489C, 120B of the Indian Penal Code, and 16, 17, 18, and 20 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, and hence they are not liable for the same. And neither they have any intention, and nor they have the reason or the knowledge to believe that any offense of this type is being committed. These are the first two ingredients that are to be fulfilled in order to constitute the charge under this section, and hence which are not fulfilled in this case. The first two ingredients, that is the commission of an offense, and the second ingredient, that the person charged with the offense under section 201 must have the knowledge or reason to believe that the main offense has been committed. These are not fulfilled. Moving further, there is no iota of proofs which shows with certainty that the accused, namely Samir, Monu, and Kalu alias Mama, have committed the offense under section 201 IPC. That is, they have caused any disappearance of evidence or given any false information during the investigation. As shown by the CDR and the mobile locations, mere the presence of the accused near the place where it is suspected that the evidence has been disappeared is in a particular time period doesn't bring home the charge under section 201 of the Indian Penal Code, that is against the accused. As in the present case, only because of the simple fact that Kalu and Sohail were seen together doesn't mean that the Kalu has disappeared any type of evidence that was present in the house of Sohail, as well as the fact that he held him in abscond. Neither is there any proof that is presented by the prosecution which with full certainty or with any type of certainty shows that there was an incriminating substance that was present at the house of the Sohail, or the Sohail has absconded to Bangladesh. Also, under section as contended by the prosecution, mere switching off of the phone would not constitute a charge under section 201 IPC. As they have said that Mono would be liable under this, as they have switched off his phone from 3rd of Feb 2015 to 7th of Feb 2015. And this will not constitute a charge in this section because the ingredients are not fulfilled. And the second thing is, they have also mentioned in their memorial that both Samir and Monu, the accused, have mentioned in their statement that they have not known about the Ficken notes, and this has already been established by the council that these are not true because they really doesn't know about the Ficken notes that were present in their bags. And also under Article 23 of the Constitution of India, no person accused of any offense shall be compelled to be a witness against himself. And it has also been mentioned in the leading case of MP Sharma versus Satish Chandra, in which our Supreme Court has said the same. Hence, these also by the prosecution, the accused were liable and were made liable on the basis that they were tampering the evidence. And there's no mention in the charge sheet any instance which say that the accused, Samir, Monu, along with Kalu, were involved in the act of tampering the evidence. And this is a big blame that must be supported with at least one proof, and there's no proof that is presented by the prosecution on this basis. Hence, the third and the fourth ingredient, that is the disappearance of evidence or the giving of the false information. And the fourth ingredient being that the act should be done in order to screen the offender is not hereby proved. These at the first place drop the charges has also been mentioned in Parvinder Kaur versus State of Punjab that in order to establish the charge under section 201 IPC, it is essential to prove that the offense committed should be there and supported with evidences. Mere suspicion is not sufficient. Hence, these are not established here. Moving on to the further issue, that whether the act of the accused persons amount to waging of war against the government of India under section 121 and 123 of the Indian Penal Code 1860. It is really pertinent to mention here that no sanction for the prosecution is given by the district magistrate for the offences under these sections. The Exhibit 4, please refer to page 45 of the moved proposition, where it says it refers to the sanction of the Honorable District Court to start the prosecution against the accused. And in this sanction, Section 121 and 123 of the IPC are not mentioned, and will be deemed as no sanction is provided by the Honorable Court to start the prosecution against the accused under these sections. It hereby drops the charges in this trial under these sections at the first place. But the Council will further move to the arguments under these sections. That the offense these charges are being argued against the accused are on the basis of a conspiracy of the bomb blast at the Indian Army convoy in Pulwama on 15th of August 2015. It is done as per the prosecution story, but there's no proof to it. It has already been established by the Council that they are not liable under these offenses, and neither they have the intention or the knowledge of the said offense. In fact, there's no content evidences that are being presented by the prosecution that show that they are planning to make any type of unlawful or illegal act. Hence, they have not attempted to commit any offense which would likely to wage war against the government of India. The accused have an organization which is named as the Youth Union and is working for the upliftment of the oppressed people of the West Bengal. They had recently started a campaign against the government as they were putting sanctions on the working of the organization. They were just exercising one of their basic fundamental rights that is vested by them by the.
Your time is over now.
Or please conclude your submissions.
You conclude.
Sir, just give me 1 minute. I will summarize
Okay,
my
all right.
last issue.
Within 1 minute, you'll say.
Thank you, sir. So they were just exercising one of their basic fundamental rights, and hence they are just being dragged into this case because neither they have any fault, nor they have any intention to violate any law. Also, as being mentioned by the prosecution, that the all their evidences are proved by the CDRs as well as the mobile tower locations. This is not sufficient because, as mentioned by the prosecution, as I can read from their memorial, that there was an active suggestion and stimulation by the accused to use the violence with the help of the explosives, which can be proved by the tower locations. The tower location doesn't prove that they were conspiring to do anything, and the call detail records doesn't prove that too. Hence, these charges under Section 121, that is the waging of war against the government of India, is not proved as there's no evidence to it. Neither the offences on the basis of which this is done, that is the main offences under the said sections, is proved hereby. Section 123 of the IPC shows that the waging of war shall be done in secrecy, and at the first place, as it's contended that the waging of war is not done by the accused, this also drops these charges hereby. The council will rest here with this argument. If the bench is satisfied with the contentions raised, the council would like to move towards the prayer.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Your time is over now.
Sir, would you give me just 1 second so that I can.
Now time is over. We have already given 1 minute to you.
Thank you so much.
Now question is, do you also disputed the recovery of the counterfeit currency from the accused number 1 and 2? Do you admit or are you opposing what defense you have taken on that?
Sir, the question is from speaker 1 or speaker 2?
It is who have argued this point. I think you have argued.
Yes, sir, I have argued.
Recovery for 98B and
Can you repeat the question?
489B, 489C you have argued, I think.
Yes, sir.
What is your defense regarding the recovery of fake currency from accused number 1 and 2?
Your Lordship, the recovery cannot be doubted in this present case. The only doubt that we are proposing is that the accused had no mens rea. They didn't know that they were carrying FICN, and they thought that they were carrying the actual currency notes, which is totally within the pursuit of law. The only contention is that they didn't have the mens rea, which is an important essential to prove this section.
Okay, all right. Next, section 11A, Indian Evidence Act, was argued. I think speaker 2 argued on this point.
Yes, sir.
So this relates to the disturbed area because Pulwama is in Jammu and Kashmir and it is a disturbed area. That's why 11A is not applicable or not applicable.
Sir, the main offences is happened in Delhi as well as in Malda, West Bengal. So these are not come under the ambit of the extensive disturbance areas.
Okay. And next judge ask the question. Another judge.
One question from speaker number 1.
Yes,
You
sir.
have gone through, I think you have gone through Evidence Act section 106.
Section 106. Yeah, sure.
if you have a special novel, there is a principle of criminal law that devil does not know the mind of the man. If you have purchased currency notes, you have to prove it. You have to brought the evidence to defeat the prosecution. What you evidence shown in your submissions that you have no knowledge about the currency note was not counterfeit no currency note or fake currency notes.
Sir, the only contention is that the counsel that the accused didn't have the intention. The evidence for intention cannot come in from anywhere. Like we cannot come with any evidence to prove the intention of any person, because even the devil doesn't know the intention of any person.
Yes.
So
This
no
is the
evidence, I
principle.
think, is sufficient to prove the intention. But since it is on the prosecution to prove the intention beyond the reasonable doubt, which they have not proved in their submissions. So our contention that the intention was not there is totally valid.
You have not bring any of the document or any evidence to show your good intention also. Whether
Your
you have
Lordship, there were no.
obtained money from any person, you have not shown the your urgency, or you have not shown any type of the evidence to show your intention also.
Sir,
Lordship,
may I-
intention cannot be apprehended by any evidence. So even the only also that the contention is that the accused didn't know that they were that FICN was there. So how would the intention would come into mind or come into the minds of the accused that they had to use
There is
that
a
for
provision.
terrorist act?
There is this is for this question. There is a provision for 106 in Evidence Act. If you have special knowledge, you have to prove it. Okay. ठीक
Yes,
sir. And next question from speaker number 2.
Yes, sir.
You have shown that there is no agreement between the accused persons. No
Yes, sir.
direct
We had.
agreement. Yes, for criminal conspiracy.
Yes, sir.
But there are some conversation between co-accused and main accused. What do you want to say for this conversation? And
So there's
upon
no
conversation,
conversation. Yes,
they
sir.
they came from Malda to Delhi, and currency
Yes,
note
sir.
was required from Delhi.
Yes, sir.
Continue speaking between conversation between them. What do you want to say to rebuttal for it?
Sir, as I also stated, that the organization was going through a campaign in which they were trying to raise awareness about the rights of the oppressed classes, as also mentioned under the statements that are given by the accused under Section 161 CRPC. And because of this fact, the accused were given the task of raising the funds, and because of which they were traveling between Malda from West Bengal to Delhi, and they were having the conversations. And the conversations are not as it is presented by the prosecution. Only the CDRs and the mobile locations are presented, which say that they have any conversation, but what type of conversation, it's not proved here.
Okay.
Okay. So
Thank you, sir.
prosecution side, is there any rebuttal on behalf of the prosecution?
Yes, sir. Shall I start?
Yes, you may start your rebuttal.
Indeed, sir. So, sir, the case cited by my opposing counsel, that of Pawan Kumar, solely talks about wrong FIR number, whereas the contention of the defense is based on the correct FIR number being present on the search and seizure memo. Thus, the case law is irrelevant to their argument, sir. Moreover, the defense's contention
No.
about
What they are submitting, they are saying that at the time of the search memo, how the FIR number was inserted, because at the time of the recovery, there was no FIR. FIR was registered later on.
Yes, sir.
That's
I'm
why-
coming to that point.
Yes.
Shall I continue? Okay, thank you, sir. So, sir, basically the defense's contention about the FIR not being present on the search and seizure memo, leading to the FIR being antedate. Only after forming an FIR, the police can take cognizance of the offense. So it is to be understood that FIR number is bound to appear on seizure memos, as is a procedure established by law under Section 154 and 157 of CRPC. Second point is that the ingredients, as my opposing counsel mentioned, that the ingredients missing is that of time not being mentioned when the FIR was registered, as well as the general diary reference being absent. It is submitted that information received is mentioned as on the timing has been given, that is of 10:55 hours on 24th February 2015.
So
The defense.
how this section has been added at that time when the FIR was registered? Section 16, 17, 18, 20 of the UAP Act was not there at that time. It was added later on. How this section has come on the FIR? What they are raising
Yes.
the allegation? They are
So basically, throughout the investigation, new facts and new facts were discovered, on the basis of which these sections were later on added to the FIR.
it can't be come on the FIR. No? It will come in the charge sheet or in the supplementary statement or in any other document, but it can't be on the FIR because the FIR was registered on 25th after recovery of the fake currency. FIR was registered immediately thereafter, and the sections were added later on after say 10 days, 15 days thereafter, when the investigation was transferred to NIA. Then how these sections have come on the FIR? They are seeking on the clarification on these points. How the investigation agency has added these sections prior to the reference to referring the case to the NIA, because it was registered much prior to referring the case to the NIA. Is it correct?
Sir. Yes, sir. So the investigation is, so the police have added these. So basically, Section 16 talks about counterfeit currency. Section 17 talks about raising funds. Section 18 and 20 also talk about being part of
Only
terrorist
give the
organization.
explanation. But don't tell us the sections. We know about it. Please tell. Sir is asking when the proper section of UPA and the Terrorist Act was added in FIR, whether it was added in FIR or whether it was added in charge sheet. You know, there are different things. FIR is different thing. FIR means first information report. First information report was that 2% are carrying fake currency notes. You, on the basis of the information, you have registered the FIR under section 489 ABC. Later on, you have added FIR in Unlawful Activities Act and others. Then when it was added, whether it was added in FIR, whether it was added in charge sheet, you know, both what are the differences between FIR and charge sheet?
So there is a procedure which the police sends the report regarding addition in the sections to the state government, then to the central government, and then it is sanctioned. Therefore, the delay.
I'm not asking for delayed. Okay, koi nahi, sir.
All right.
Whether any public person joined the investigation at the time of the recovery or not. Both. This is question from both speaker number 1 and speaker number 2 from prosecution side.
So.
Sorry, sir. Please, can you repeat the question?
Yes, sir. Please.
You are not audible.
Whether any public person joined the investigation at the time of the recovery of currency notes or not.
Sir, by public persons, do you mean independent witness?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir. There are independent witnesses mentioned, and they have signed on the Pancharama, that is the search memo.
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir.
So shall I continue with the rebuttal?
Yes.
Okay, sir. So the defense's second contention is that of the certain ingredients being missing in the FIR, such as the general diary reference. Sir, a general diary entry or a daily diary entry is made when any kind of a complaint is lodged and the police enter the details in their records. Thereafter, if the police believe that there is some prima facie evidence of a cognizable offense being committed, it is registered as an FIR. It is optional to either put the GD number or the FIR number. However, in our case, the FIR number is mentioned as is 15/2015. Furthermore, there is a procedure first that, okay, sorry, sir. Moving on with respect to section 489B and C, as your lordships have also mentioned, my opposing counsel has not given any evidence in the present case to prove their contention of the accused not having knowledge or mens rea of the FICNs in their possession, except for stating that they had no knowledge. And the defense has based their entire argument for section 15, 16, and 17 of UAPA on this. With respect to section 20 of UAPA, the defense only proves that the accused were not involved in any terrorist organization. However, sir, the prosecution is charging the accused under section 20 of UAPA with respect to the accused being involved in a terrorist gang, as has been defined under section 2L of UAPA and has also been argued by the prosecution previously. Moreover, sir, my opposing counsel rightly said that the ingredients of section 111A need to be satisfied. However, the council also mentioned that Pulwama is not a disturbed area. Your lordships, Pulwama is one of the most disturbed areas and attacks have been going on since years, as we all know. Hence, the section can and will be attracted. Moreover, sir, my opposing counsel said that there is no evidence to prove that the accused had tampered with the evidence. However, it is mentioned in the charge sheet that the police could not find any evidence during the search of A5, that is Sohail's house, as A3 had already destroyed all the evidences. Furthermore, A3 was giving evasive answers to the investigation agency regarding the whereabouts of A5, which leads to screening the offender. That's it, Your Lordship.
General diary, please let us know. Your FIR has not mentioned the GD general diary number reference. When the police force goes from the police station, generally they entered in a register that they are on the basis of the certain information, the team are going to such and such place to conduct the raid and to arrest the people. So that diary, general diary reference has not been mentioned in the FIR. That's why they are pointing out.
Agreed, sir.
It should be mentioned therein. It is there blank. Blank is there. Nothing is mentioned there.
Agreed, sir. After filing the general diary, an FIR is filed and the FIR number is mentioned. Therefore, mentioning the general diary reference number is optional.
Not optional, but
Not
it is
optional.
mandatory.
It is mandatory.
The prosecution case, there are some irregularities during conduction of the investigation, but all irregularities are not hampered the prosecution case. Don't worry, sir. I think they are argued from both
And the
sides.
rebuttal defense side also wants to rebuttal.
Yes, Your
argument.
Lordships. Yes, Your Lordships.
Then you have also 3 minutes time.
Yes, Your Lordships. First of all, the contention of the defense side is that the prosecution said in their arguments that the tower locations and the transcripts which were obtained during the investigation, but there is no prima facie transcripts available in the evidence as have been provided to the court in front of the court. There is no transcript, only the location and CDR analysis, that is whom they were talking to. So without the transcripts, how can they infer that they were having a criminal conspiracy or a conspirating mind or a common intention? It is not proved here. The second condition is that prosecution said that the accused are using the currency as genuine, but there is no proof and no evidence given by the prosecution that the accused were using the currency as genuine, because it is on the prosecution to prove that to prove the beyond reasonable doubt that the accused are guilty of an offense, which is not proved by their arguments or by the memorial submitted by them. The next point is that they contended that they used bombs, but there is no evidence and even no recovery of a single fact or a single thread that can show that the bombs were to be used or any explosive substance of any matter was to be used. It was only a contention which was given by the police and was taken up by the prosecution in their arguments. The next point is that the prosecution mentioned that the NIA concluded that the accused are liable and destroyed the evidence. But the statements or the charge sheet cannot be in any way proof or the decision of the final courts. The next point of my contention is that they contended that Sohail crossed the border of India to Bangladesh, but there is no proof. Even the prosecution is contending that they asked a BSF officer that that has this person crossed the border, but BSF person also didn't know. So there is no evidence that Sohail has crossed. This shows that the police has lacked investigation in this case. They are not up to the mark. The next point of my contention is that the witness, signs of the witness that were provided on the season memos was just one independent witness, whereas it is mentioned in law that there needs to be two witnesses in order to prove, in order to the memos to be valid. Two independent witnesses. The next point of my contention is that the prosecution argued that the organization is not is a terrorist gang, but we have certainly proved in our submissions that the it is not even a terrorist gang. It is not even a terrorist act per se. To constitute a terrorist act, some essentials were needed to be fulfilled, and those were not. So it is neither terrorist act and neither terrorist organization or neither a terrorist act in the first instance. The next contention is that prosecution mentioned that the three accused, that is Kallu, Samir, and Monu, destroyed evidence, but there is no evidence to prove that they destroyed evidence, because there is only the statements that they are that the accused are saying, which are not admissible in the court of law. They are only saying that the statements made by the accused and the NIA team or the police cell, that they destroyed evidence, but there is no evidence that they destroyed the evidence. Maybe there is a possibility that there was no evidence in the first place, which is a very valid point according to the defense contention. There was no evidence in the first place, so how they could have destroyed the evidence? Then last point of my contention is that in the section 111A of the Evidence Act, the prosecution contended that Pulwama is a disturbed area. But if we closely read the section 111A, from the first line, we can apprehend that where a person is accused of having committed any offense specified in the subsection 2 in any area declared to be disturbed. But the offense that is carrying the FICN is totally conducted from in West Bengal or in Delhi, which they are accused, not proved yet. So how is the contention 111A that they are that the defense has the onus to prove? It is onus is only on the prosecution to prove, even if they use the section 111A in this particular case. The defense rests with their submissions.
Thank you. Prosecution side,
I just,
whether you have obtained any transcript of the CDR or not? But one question.
Yes, sir. So for with that, with respect to that, sir, it is the moot proposition is not the encyclopedia of facts, sir. A lot of things are not mentioned. A lot of things are mentioned. However, we cannot solely depend our entire case on the moot proposition. Hence, the transcripts have been given as evidence. They're just not annexed with the evidences produced.
Defense team,
So,
you are
Yes, Your Lordship.
defense team. You are stating that there is a mention of FIR on the search memo.
Yes, Your Lordship.
That search memo is not is only a personal search memo. When
Yes, Lordship. But the contention is that why is the FIR number present on it? When
Yes.
the FIR is registered after
after registration of the FIR on the arrest of the accused,
Yes,
then
Lordship.
the police, then the investigation agency start searching the personal memo of the accused person. At that time, there must be FIR number. FIR has already been registered by then.
Your
Now
Lordship.
you are
After
stating that
registration of the FIR, they mentioned they conducted the personal search and arrest of the accused.
Yes, Your Lordship, can you repeat the question in brief? I couldn't get the question.
you are submitting that the FIR number should not have been mentioned on search memo. How
Yes,
you are arguing this? Because after the arrest of the accused, by that time FIR has already been registered when the accused was arrested.
Yes, Your Lordship.
Then search memo was conducted on the accused.
Lordship, I would like to say that the arrest was first the arrest was there, and after that the FIR was registered, because in the statement given in the FIR it is written that we have conducted such search and such persons are arrested. After that, FIR is registered. That's why there is not even the time of registration of FIR. That's why the defense was saying that
FIR time is not there.
time is very important in this particular case.
All right.
Yes,
That's all.
Lordship.
That's all.
Yes, Sir Lordship. Thank you, Lordship.
All right.
I thank the honorable judges for their time and the effort. And also I congratulate the participants for doing so well. So I just hope the best ones, they move to the next round. And I'll request the honorable judges to kindly give the scores and send it to me in WhatsApp or via mail as per your convenience, sir.
All
So
right.
all the luck, good luck to you participants, and thank you so much. So we conclude today's session.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Sir.